have to call roll of the members. Bob Hassinger,
I'm here.
Alan Baker,
Here.
Dave Robbins is here. Bob Carroll and Amar Clark are currently not here, but with three of us here, we do have a quorum. And we have our guest, Evan Brassard, our town administrator.
Here I am.
He is there, excellent. And as usual, we have another member joining. I will pause momentarily here. I just called roll. Bob Carroll, are you present?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. I was pretty sure you were here since I could see your video, but just as a formality. Okay, so as usual on our committee agenda, the first agenda item is public input. I will go through the motions here anyway. If there are any members of the public present who wish to speak on an issue that's not already on the committee's agenda for tonight, now would be the time to raise your hand. I see no attendees raising their hands, no attendees not raising their hands. And unless one of us has something that qualifies as public input, we will proceed to the next agenda item, which is committee reorganization. Now that Mr. Hassinger and myself have been formally reappointed to the committee for another few years, our committee membership is up to date, and it is time for us to organize ourselves by selecting a chair, vice chair, and clerk. And we all haven't always had a vice chair, but it's probably not a bad idea to have someone officially designated as vice chair just in case. So we haven't had a clerk since Bill Jones had resigned from the committee. He had been our last clerk, and since that time, in his absence, I've been taking notes and preparing minutes. But it would be quite all right if someone else wanted to be chair or vice chair or clerk.
Well, I can tell you that clerk is not my job. I can't. Vice chair, okay. And I want to nominate Dave for chair.
Second.
He's been doing the most work.
Well, okay, for another year at least. I mean, I've been chair for like 7 years now, and I don't mind continuing it, but someone else could have a turn at that too.
I move the question.
All righty. With no further discussion, Mr. Baker.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. I could vote against myself, but I don't think I will. And motion carried unanimously. I get to keep on being chair for a little while longer. And I think I heard Mr. Hassinger offer to consider at least being vice chair.
I know how to do the chair thing.
So
I know how to do the vice chair thing.
Yep. I suppose it would take a motion of some sort to.
I will move to nominate Bob Hassinger as vice chair of the committee.
I guess I can second that.
Sure, you're allowed to second that. I suppose arguably you could be allowed to even make the motion, but it looks better someone else.
Yeah, no, I suppose. Never mind.
All right, moved and seconded that Mr. Hassinger serve as vice chair.
We should ask if there's discussion or anyone else who wants the job.
Is there any discussion? Would anybody else like to, put themselves forth?
Not
Here,
me. Both of you know committee ins and outs a lot better than me. I'm here for the IT contribution.
The IT stuff and not the administrative nonsense.
Yeah, you both run circles around me as far as like the rules and procedures.
Yeah, the administrative overhead, shall we say. It's a necessary evil. Okay, we'll put this to a vote. Mr. Baker,
Aye.
Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
All right.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Carried unanimously. Bob, you are now officially our vice chair.
Thank you.
And
Now, is Alan interested in being clerk?
Oh, I don't mind. I actually am clerk on like multiple things and other boards I'm on, but I'm totally fine doing clerk. I do find that I talk less when I'm clerk, so maybe that's a bonus for you all.
oh, there you
I'll
go.
bet you that you can touch type.
Yeah, I do. It's pretty easy for
There
me
I am. I'm
to type up.
Okay, so
anyway, yeah, I'd move, Alan.
Second.
all right, let me make a note of that.
Oh, the clerk ought to jump right in now. Oh, no, we have to.
Yes, so we have a motion on
The
the
acting
floor
clerk is taking care of that.
to designate Alan Baker as the committee's clerk. Any discussion on the motion? Further discussion? Hearing none. Alan,
Aye.
Bob H,
Aye.
Bob C.
Aye.
I can't just say Bob in this meeting. It's ambiguous. Dave votes aye as well. Okay, Alan, you are now
Cable
officially.
committee is worse, Dave. I think we still have 3 Bobs.
So Dave, do you want me to take over doing minutes for this meeting? Since we're pretty quick in and we haven't done more than I can put down.
Yep.
All right.
I generally take notes anyway, but yeah, my notes usually require a considerable amount of work to turn them into minutes. And the meeting is being recorded. Normally, we typically have just we've not preserved the recordings, although I think on a couple occasions I've downloaded the recordings so that I could review the meeting, and I can make the recording available to you. In fact, let me just ask the committee: would the committee like to generally have their recorded meetings published as many other committees do? Have the
Yes.
I would like to. I think the more that committees make public, it does a couple of things. It shows what the committee's doing, that it's active, but also it helps drive possible interest where you may actually have attendees coming or being involved with discussions, or there might be certain things that are discussed that they might be interested in personally.
All right, so I'll make a point of in informing the staff when they eventually will get, typically they get an email from Zoom the next day with a link to the video, and unless they're told, they won't preserve it. So I will make a point of making sure that it gets passed on to the Grafton TV people for transforming it into an official Town of Grafton video.
Right. Yeah, no, I was the one that started all this trouble. I was the first one that tried to do a test video of selectmen back in the late 80s. Been pushing, help push for town meeting video. Got the planning board eventually to do video. One of my most important cable committee jobs. I think
it's just that I am reminded that just because Zoom has recorded a video doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be produced into
but well, I don't know with whichever way you're doing Zoom, but you can capture the video and pass it on, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Zoom, right. Zoom records it into the cloud and sends us a link. And what the one or two times that I've captured the video, I just I'll go into the Zoom account, find the video, and download it. And that's basically what the GCTV people do too. We send Zoom. They take that link from Zoom and then they download it and process it.
Okay. Well,
It's just, we just have to make sure we tell someone to do that.
you want a motion that we want to have our meetings available on Grafton Television?
Before you motion, Bob has his hand up. I don't know.
Bob is waving his hand.
The other Bob.
The other Bob is waving his hand.
Yes, so I have my hand raised. The only cautionary tale would be that where we talk about IT matters and specifically IS, right? And potential vulnerabilities and things that someone, if they were to view the meeting and wanted to do the town or us harm in terms of, if any of the exhibits have IP addresses or specific patching or anything along those lines. I don't know as if we want that out right
Well,
in the public domain.
Yeah, that's a
And
good point.
Second item would be in the event that there is an incident, right? All of this would be discoverable and could potentially be opening the town to some exposure. And if there was litigation, right, it could be some exposure there. So may want to bounce that off council.
but it's a public meeting and anybody can come and record for themselves.
This is true. But then they have to.
I think the best plan is to be careful about what we do. There's an executive session provision for covering some of the stuff that you're talking about.
I think that would be.
Kevin can tell us.
I think it'd be good to put in practice. I mean, executive session specifically for sensitive stuff where you start talking about things to do with security and whatnot. But I think Bob Carroll has a good point that that's something to be considered if you do make this public. I wasn't even thinking about that. So I agree.
If someone comes to the meeting, right, and or attends, then we have record, right? And there's an audit trail. Putting stuff out on the internet, that's kind of like the wild blue yonder. And
I don't know what you mean by putting it out on the internet.
if we record it and post it up on the Grafton TV site.
And okay, if we don't say things, Evan, what do you think?
I think it's perfectly reasonable to make this available on the GCTV YouTube channel. Would just have to, I think, be cautious, like Bob raises a great concern. Be cautious about what we're talking to and make sure that we have a provision for executive session on the agenda to move into to discuss anything that may make the town vulnerable.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true that information that could put the town at risk is something, I think that falls within one of the executive session purposes. And so we need to be, yes, we need to be cognizant of that
So
if, right. So two things I would suggest. One is that, in the open session that we be careful to avoid discussing points or bringing up information that has a reasonable likelihood of being misused. And number two is we can plan, and maybe we should just plan as a regular feature of our meetings in an executive session should the need arise to discuss information of that nature.
Yeah, I guess what my question would be, so let's take, for example, we wanted to discuss the rework of the RFP that we got back after our recommendations. Inside of it are some security considerations, but nothing that I would think would be risky to expose, since it's general best practices for what a managed provider would do for that. So like, what is going to be the measure for a certain topic on whether or not we're going to go into executive session to discuss this? Like, for instance, if this RFP did have specifics in it to patch this vulnerability or to respond to this in a certain way, do we stop the discussion on that and move the entire thing to RFP, or just put up part of it, or how does that work?
Now, the chair has to determine that this qualifies for an executive session and should be done, and there has to be a vote to go into executive session. I'm not clear whether you really have to have it on the agenda but Evan has better information.
So you should definitely put it on the agenda. and what the reason for you to enter into executive session. It needs to be there ahead of time so that the public would be aware that you have that provision and the ability to do that. I would think that your tipping point is, I'll use as an example, the last time we went into executive session when we were all together to discuss security matters, we were discussing actual holes in our security that would have made us vulnerable. If we're discussing the need for patch management, ongoing patch management, it doesn't make us more vulnerable or less vulnerable. That's a consideration that everybody that's doing this work has on a daily basis, right? But if
Yeah.
you're going to talk about how we have problems with our patch management or we haven't been doing patch management, that I think is where the scale gets tipped, right?
Yeah, or when we have, whether it's CMD, right, or the whoever the future vendor was going to be, and they come through and do their, run through of what they've done, and they mention specifics, and they're an outside party, right? So they may not understand the concept of executive session, and they, share a document or whatever, and those are the kinds of scenarios I was more envisioning. The RFP, by definition, I mean, that's on the outside, right? So there's nothing to see there. It's more about the course of business, if we're talking subnets or switches, routers, devices, right, any specifics, and then, anything comes up with progress with like VADAR, for instance, and chart of accounts, and again, more the if we get into specific items that are maybe tickets, incidents, work that's being performed, that kind of stuff.
There's
And
a,
if we
there's
have,
a,
have that provision where you can have that executive session, that's a good workable solution where we have that available to us.
and there's, I mean, there's some gray areas there also, such as like then if you start specifically mentioning a certain application, and if the OS is say Windows 7, that right there tells someone just in the fact of saying the OS that it is vulnerable to certain things because Windows 7 is not being maintained anymore. So it probably is one of those cases where anything not in an executive session, we shouldn't go into specifics on OS versions or application, anything to do with that gives information out, IP addresses or the such.
Yeah. And this is just as an aside, right? In the course of business, with some work that we're doing on the job, right? The InfoSec guys may be aware because we had not an incident, but where a couple firewall ports were left open and shouldn't have been, and there was no incident, there was no breach or anything. But the point is, the bad actors are searching for these things, and it takes them literally 3 minutes to find those vulnerabilities. That's how little your window of time, if there's, whether it's a firewall or an OS or whatever. And I was like blown away by those stats. I was thinking like, oh yeah, you get a week or so, whatever, no big deal. 3 minutes.
I get something around 2.7 million hits from malicious actors doing sweeps and scans a day from countries such as China, Russia, India, Singapore, that just looking for vulnerable ports and applications like every day. And so you're absolutely right that like if you have something vulnerable, they likely will know before if you're not careful.
If we have something vulnerable, I think that obviously requires going into executive session, and absolutely. But otherwise, I would say the agenda ought to say something about executive session to discuss, whatever that paragraph is, if necessary.
Right.
Yep.
And,
I think
then we can move on from here, because I think maintaining the principle of openness is and transparency and communicating is important.
Is it okay to have an open-end executive session listed on the agenda to discuss sensitive topics, even if you don't have anything specific planned, or do you need to have something specifically planned ahead of time to list that as part of the agenda?
No, I think the agenda can list executive session for one or more particular, and I think there's, I couldn't quote it off the top of my head, but there's one of like 8 reasons for executive session.
Yep.
We can basically quote that on the agenda and say that there may be an executive session. It alerts the public to the fact that the committee may be doing this, but I think the select board pretty regularly has executive session on their agenda every time, described in such a way as to say we might have an executive session, but we're not promising that we will.
All right, that definitely sounds like the way to go.
So anyway, I'm not sure whether I was moving to ask Evan and GCTV to put us in what they carry.
Yep, when this meeting's over, all we have to do is email Bob DeToma and tell him to
Yep.
pull it out of Grafton Land Use's Zoom account, and he can have it put right up.
Yep, I think that's, I think since we started doing Zoom meetings, I think I did have one IT committee meeting put up that way, and that's my recollection. Is I just emailed DeToma to, or maybe it might have been that I requested some staff member to forward that to DeToma, but either way, yeah, that's really all it takes. Zoom is the recording is there on Zoom, and if we tell DeToma we want to produce that into a video, he'll do it. He'll make it happen.
My point is that as I did with the planning board, I had to finally get the board to, as a policy matter, decide that they wanted to be on television.
Yep. Well, I think I heard you making a motion to that.
I think I did. And someone ought to
second it.
Yeah, what was the exact, we talked a bunch over that, but so your motion is to do what?
ask to be carried on
Yeah.
GCTV's. Actually, I don't know, but it may be possible to be on the town. GCTV has its own web access as well as the YouTube.
Yeah.
And we'd like to be
Yeah, we'll just
the same place that other town bodies are.
we want the motion is for GCTV to publish the video of our meeting as they do for other boards and committees.
Right.
All right, second.
All right.
Somebody said.
Motion made and
Second.
seconded. Bob, Carol, did you have your?
No, that was a second, but someone I guess beat me.
Sorry.
Yeah, whatever. We've been discussing.
The clerk
this
will have to
for some
decide
time.
that, I guess.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Baker,
Aye.
Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And moving on. Next
Do you have
agenda.
anything secret we have to worry about tonight?
Not for me.
Let's just be thinking in terms of being careful not to reveal information that could pose a risk to the town. So the agenda item here is update from town administrator.
Yeah,
We're waiting for 25 minutes.
it's 27 actually, but that's fine.
But who's
Um,
who's
counting?
Who's counting?
Hey,
Um,
no, you've been contributing. It's a good thing you were here.
there we go. What, Dave, did you want me to, I don't remember your agenda. Do I have a separate section for the RFP or is that part of
Yeah,
my update?
I listed the RFP as a separate agenda,
Gotcha. Okay.
agenda item.
Yep, I'll do that separate. So, our major initiative right now has been doing all of the background for our switch from Google Suite over to Office 365. And so we're well underway with that. I thought we would be done with that in June, but I had to hit pause on that project due to financial constraints. So I have to wait for July 1 when the new money arrives. And so other than that, we've been, just kind of doing our normal consistent stuff. We are piloting a new security camera right now. And if that works out well, then we will be upgrading everything at the municipal center. Because right now we're just running this LoRax system that we want to, it's pretty antiquated. So the state had wanted us to try, I can't remember the name, it's like Vercana camera system. It's all cloud-based to point and look at the clerk's Dropbox for mail-in voting and absentee, all that stuff. So we ran conduit and punched some holes in the soffit and have that up there. We're going to test that for about a month or so. And if that works out, then we'll probably move to that platform because it'll give us commonality rather than have a system for the clerk and a system for everything else. Their system's pretty much modular. It's all just PoE and cloud-based. So it looks like it's a pretty decent way for us to go.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So for security cameras that are cloud-based, do you know what the local retention or local buffering is for video in case where the connectivity to the cloud is disrupted?
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was 7 days per camera. So it was plenty of time. I didn't have a lot of concern there. My major concern security camera wise is that, it looks like when they provisioned the original setup in town hall, they had, X number of cameras. And so they did their setup based on X number of cameras, which, the better way to do it is figure out your focal length, figure out how many cameras you need, and then provision your system based on that. The nice thing about the system that we are currently piloting is it's totally scalable. So, 1 to, I think it's like 200 cameras. So I don't think we would, we don't need that kind of coverage, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility, and all you need is, Cat 6 to the location and that's it. The whole thing is pretty much done. So
Yeah, you mean you're thinking in terms of where do we need the coverage and let's get the cameras to do that?
right.
As opposed to,
Rather than I got this 12 unit system, let's spread them out as far as possible.
let's throw 12 cameras up wherever we think
Right.
we can.
And we
Yeah.
need some better exterior coverage, really, for not only for security, but also for liability. You got a lot of moving vehicles out there. So we're gonna work on that over time.
Can I ask another question about the
Sure.
the cloud service? How are you managing who has access to these videos? Is it going to be tied into the same authentication system as like you're moving to the Office 365 environment? So is it going to be tied to your AD environment logins, or is it completely separate? Or
Completely separate. And it probably is only accessible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, realistically. So,
okay.
Police chief or police department has a login. Clerk's office, because they have to be able to look at their box. The interesting thing is, with this particular product, you can provision your logins to only give access to certain cameras based on the login, which is, the product that Grafton's currently using is it's all or nothing. If you can get into the system, you can see everywhere. Whereas, that might not be the way you want to roll it out, right? You'd want the police department to be able to see everything, but maybe you don't want the clerk's office to see it's town hall, so I'm not really worried about it that much, but there is that feature to provision. But it'll be pretty limited access.
So you mentioned access for the clerk's office and such. Does that mean there's going to be shared accounts having access, or is it going to be
each
Okay.
person gets its own? Well, it's the town of Grafton's account, but each user is individual. They
Okay,
all have their own login. I believe that it's all two-factor with the app on your phone.
okay.
Um,
That was my next question.
Yep, there you go. So they're this particular product, and I can obviously share some specs. We just got the demo camera up at the end of last week. So it is more and more used by municipalities because it doesn't have proprietary software that you need to host on your server to, update every 2 years for, $10,000 type of thing. So it is gaining some traction, I know, with the municipal crowd. Because I've seen this company a number of times at different events that I go to, for government stuff.
Do you know what type of data retention that the service provider has as far as the length that the
It's
video- Yep.
365 days per camera,
Oh, perfect.
which for the town purposes is more than adequate.
Mhm.
I mean, I had a better camera system in my previous town, and I think the farthest I ever had to go back was 90 days. And we were retaining for over a year as well. But unless it's in the police department, there's really, if we were the victim of some kind of crime that was more than 90 days ago, we're probably not finding out about it.
Yeah, I think the furthest I've ever had to go back with our police department at my university is we went back 5 months or so because of something that the federal government got involved with.
Yep.
But yeah, usually 3 months is sufficient from
And yeah, and just to be clear, the PD in Grafton has their own standalone system with their own retention policies and practices based on, whatever the best practice is for that in Massachusetts.
So this will only cover the municipal center. It's not going to be for other town properties.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. I mean, if it works and it's a good product, then we can certainly, expand our usage over time. But it's really just trying to get this antiquated. It's basically, we're running an NVR system right now, which is what you would get at Costco for your house. So
I assume that the schools have some sort of a system,
yep, standalone. Yep.
and they also overlap with the municipal center.
Yeah, so the school will, with the new product, have access or can have access should they choose to be able to see inside the municipal center. Currently, the police have access to the school cameras, but no one else does, and that's standard practice as well. If the school wanted access into all the municipal stuff, I would have zero issue with that, especially if we start getting our better coverage outside. Then it might be more useful to them.
To cover the field and whatnot that's behind
The fields, but also, parent A says that parent B backed into him in the parking lot watching, little Johnny's football game. That's primarily what that would get used for, I would think.
I forgot all about the parent pickup line through municipal.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Or we've had a couple of fights that have started in the school area that come right up against kind of the municipal area. So, for things like that, I think it's very few and far between. And quite frankly, I don't know that Jay will want to have full access to everything. He might just say, well, if I need something, I'll ask you. And then he doesn't have to be responsible for any of the information. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Right now, there's no need to even have that conversation yet.
Yeah. The
No, I was
cameras
just-
cover the parking lot behind the senior center.
Yes.
No, I was just thinking about the
There's
fact.
been no controversy there, has there?
No, there has not.
Not, I was thinking not so much about students and stuff like that, but just that the headquarters for the school.
Yep, yep. Yep, absolutely. And I want one on the Brigham Hill side so that I can make sure when the farmer's market's there, I can monitor how much bread the bread guy has left. So I know when I have to get out of my office.
That's important.
So you'll be able to do that right. Yeah, okay.
Right. I can see as soon as Chuck starts putting stuff out, I can page the staff and be like, now's the time.
Dedicated
Oh.
red guy cam.
Yeah, bread guy cam. So, other than that, we are really hyper focused on the Vadar transition. We're 12 days into that being live, live, not mirroring in soft, right? We're 12 days into this being our one and only. We've been doing a lot of training with staff. And we are, the challenging piece is not only are we rolling out new technology for the staff, but we're rolling out new policy and procedure on how they interact with the software and how we track our finances, which is a big change for people. And I would say that our staff is adapting really well. I think they have a lot of with a lot of this technology stuff. It seems like they don't necessarily care what you're using, but if they trust you to tell them that this is the way to go, they'll get on board. And I think Mary's done that with the staff. So we've been really hard at work on that. Now every single transaction gets the invoice uploaded separately into the software so that we can then search by vendor code and by purchase date and all this other stuff that before you'd have to say, I bought that, I think in June of 2021, and you have to go over to the file and pull the whole one long PDF and search through it and find it. Now you can just, 3 clicks and you've got all that information at your fingertips. So, very happy with the product, but it is labor intensive, and they've really been up to their eyeballs in it. But like I said, staff is doing really well with it, and they've really jumped right on board. So we're happy. As far as other IT, I think I started talking maybe about the transition. No, I did. I started with that. Sorry. The Google Office 365 transition. I think that by the time you guys meet again in August, we'll have a substantive update. Right now, all we've done is gone through, users and culled out all of the paused accounts, and it's just a mess from years of people doing different things. So it's really a matter of just cleaning all of that up. But we're right there.
So all the like the G drives will get migrated to SharePoint somewhere.
Yep, exactly. Or OneDrive, whatever we wind up. I'm actually really interested in seeing how we can better integrate Teams into what we do on a daily basis. I've been using some of the Teams product with William, just nobody in the municipal center or municipal government's really using Teams at all, unless they have to go to a Teams meeting, and then that's the only time it gets opened. But we've been using it quite a bit for joint project tracking and being able to communicate back and forth without lengthy emails or phone calls or whatever. So it is a good tool, and I think we're going to try to get the staff a little more on board with that.
Are you using the planner part of that with it, or are you using the project piece tied in with SharePoint and Teams?
The right now just the project piece, but we're really just exploring it. It's really just Grafton being a Google town for so long, it's a lot of us just playing around and figuring out how we want to roll it out. I did talk with some of the guys at CMD a little while back that have some interesting ideas of how to put some of our processes, into a more tech-based solution. So, we'll look at that too when the time is right. But
if you have any interest, and if not, no big deal. But if you have any interest, I don't mind coming by some point to talk with you and Will and show you some of the examples of what we do with our Office 365 environment at my university.
yeah,
I mean, there are things we do that I'm not necessarily a big fan of, but there's a lot of things that seem like might be pretty productive uses
right.
that Grafton can do.
I will definitely take you up on that, Alan. Thank you. So that's kind of it. We're in the June is not the month, generally speaking, that we do real exciting things. We're either scrambling to use what we have left of our tech budget, or we're totally hunkered down. Don't let anybody spend any money until we hit July 1, which was kind of the case this year, because we were pretty aggressive at the beginning of the year, trying to get these projects off the ground.
So Evan, I was hoping that you were going to also talk a little bit about the web page redesign.
Oh, sure.
Um, so obviously that was covered in last night's select board meeting. I have some interest more so in the security of the web page side, since it can be a portal to a lot of information that's in there. And so I know that it's currently being designed, and I think the usability of it for users, improving that is a big thing for a lot of people. And I know that's what the select board's commenting or focusing on a lot on. And I think that's important also. But I also am curious about, things code-wise that's being done on it. So I don't know if that's something we can talk about tonight, or if that's something we can talk about at some point. But I do have interest in some of the protections going in place for that environment.
Sure. So I am not the expert on that. I pretty much gave that project entirely to William, and let him run with it. Being a millennial and all, he understands that better than me. But I think it would be perfectly appropriate to invite him to your next meeting and talk about that. I don't have a tremendous amount of concern, only because it's the same exact company that we've been using. So I don't think we're going to be any more at risk, but it's definitely a conversation worth having it. And I don't have the specifics. I only have weighed in so far on some of the framework of what it looks like, the color palette, and then where, some of the web page, items and buttons will be positioned. So
yeah, I think on that topic, I know Matt last night spoke at some length of his interest in the topic. I have mentioned to William that I have a fair amount of interest in sort of the website design more from a user experience point of view and information architecture point of view. And I think William probably has a fairly good handle on that, on some of that. But I also know one or two other people who are not on the IT committee or the select board, but some other people who have an interest in similar topics, website design, user information architecture, user experience. And I think it would probably be helpful, at some point when William gets far enough into it to have some fairly concrete ideas or thoughts about the design of the website, that it'd be worthwhile getting together William together with a few people who have a considerable interest in that topic. I know Bob Haskman has been dealing with websites for a very long time. So I think there are probably several of us who are particularly interested in discussing the website design in terms of the user experience. I think Alan has another angle on it, which also needs to be taken into consideration, and there may be others, but I think there are probably several people in town who would be very interested in being involved in some meaningful way to help to make sure that the website redesign results in a website that's a whole lot more usable to the various users communities that touch it.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly want to do whatever I can. I put up the first website Grafton ever had. It was mostly planning board stuff at the time, but I've been as much as I could be with it all along, particularly the usability, how we let people access stuff. Ann Morgan, while she was at the planning board, did quite a lot, particularly with the planning board organization. And I think that probably works as well as any of them for people who want to know what's going on in our areas. And that was a result of the sort of thing that Dave's talking about. So I'm very interested.
Did you convert
The only
from
thing I would
the-
add to is to follow some sort of approach or methodology, with some rigor. It's not just we ask everyone for what they think and what they want. And then the other piece is, I'm sure we have some analytics tied to this, right? So understand what people are looking at, what their clicks are, and what's hot and not.
Yeah, so we the basics of at least the framework that we're looking at is, Civic Plus is our vendor. They were the response to our procurement process, and then it's kind of like a la carte, right? So you get to look at 50 websites that they've done and other ones that maybe they weren't involved with, but you get to go through and say, this is what I want our document center to look like. This is what I want our community calendar to look like. This is where we've been getting our most complaints is in the functionality of, XYZ, and tweak it. So, I mean, I think probably the best way to do that would be to have William attend your next meeting, show where we are with the mock-ups or the wireframe, and then, solicit any feedback you might have, kind of like we did with the RFP, because he is tied to a timeline, that we want to make sure that we hit our targets there as well.
You can definitely have too many cooks in the kitchen on something like this also, where sometimes you'll end up with people with completely different thoughts of what's better. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I think there's plenty of people who'll be able to come on the user experience part as well as I would, or better. So like for me, the main thing is I'm interested in is, what the backend communication looks like as far as where it's pulling this data, where it's searching this data, what it has access to, and then the front end security of it, how that's handled and patched and such, to make sure that just someone can't come in and gain access to the page, which may be nothing more than just a black eye for Grafton, but still it's a bad luck.
Yeah, it's really, I don't have a lot of security concern there, but you're right. It's the optics of it could be certainly be pretty bad, because everything that's on the website is by definition public information. So
yep. Well, and so
but-
that's one of the reasons why I'm curious about the final information as far as the back end communication. If it's pulling stuff from a location where the stuff is kept and it has access to certain things,
yeah,
is there others? It does.
Nope,
okay.
it's all user upload. So,
so it's all locally stored on it.
Yep. So we have what's called a document center. So we'll take our PDF or what have you, send it up into the document center, put it on the page. It does not talk back. There's no automatic upload. There's no grabbing data from a server at night and uploading automatically. It's not doing any of that stuff.
Yeah,
So then is there obvious retention for the site, like backups and such for a certain period for that, obviously?
It's basically forever. The interesting thing, with our website that we have now is it became over time so sprawling and so, just filled with information that is no longer relevant, because, that's how government works. We always add, we don't ever take anything away. There's snow advisories on there from 2012, right? No one, that may be a public record, but nobody needs that. And so what we'll do is we basically take all the data that's there, freeze it, right, pull it down into this just amalgamated file in case we ever do need anything that's in there, and then you tell them the key data that you want moved over to migrate. So they're migrating about 5,000 documents to that we want to retain, meeting minutes, think about it, meeting minutes, agendas, all that stuff, going back to the earliest points of the website. We want to keep, retain, and move all of that stuff over. But again, the doggy mayor from 2010, good to know, but not, we should have that somewhere else, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, there are some rules about records retention for
Yep.
from the state, from the, you know, and we probably
Yeah.
have our local, but it's probably worthwhile to think in terms of, yeah, applying record retention policies to the website.
Yeah, and we've been,
Instead of-
the nice thing about Civic Plus is they work a ton in Massachusetts, so they're
Yep.
very familiar with our needs in that regard. So, you know, realistically, every single thing that's been uploaded to the website should be saved locally and backed up, right? Because there's really the data is so small, realistically, in the grand scheme of things, that we don't really need a public document disposal policy in the digital realm, right? We need it for our like clerk's office so that we don't have to keep, or the accounting office, we don't have to keep paper records of something for more than a decade. But once it's scanned in as a PDF, it takes up so little space that realistically
It's
we
all
keep
text.
stuff.
It's so compressible that, yeah, it's very small.
Yeah, we
And-
don't delete, we literally do not delete anything.
And
Just
so the government requirements is what, 7 years?
depends on the document. So
Okay.
so depending on what the document is, some is 7, some is 10, some is forever.
Oh, how easy.
It is actually it's a weird governmental issue because it seems like it's straightforward until you talk to the records retention people, and then you learn that it's not. So when we're looking at a specific type of record, we always call records retention. That's our standard operating procedure, because it's easier to just call them and have them approve. Yep, anything over 7 years can go, rather than, well, not that part of the document. That's 10 years, and you know, so on and so forth. So
Oh, Bob Hassinger, you had your hand up.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons you have all that old outdated stuff is because there isn't anybody in charge of dealing with that, which has been a theme that we've discussed for as long as we've existed.
Right.
And that's been one of my things for all these years. You couldn't find out who was in charge, and you couldn't have anybody having a focus. You know, that stuff is okay to have somewhere, but it shouldn't be in the main stream.
Right.
And so on. But now, this week, I wanted to go back further than all the files we have. We have files for every project that we see at the planning board.
Yep.
And I wanted to go back. I want to find out how I voted on an issue, which actually, and we need an executive session to discuss.
Yep.
I hate to ask. I hate to ask the people in the building about that one, you know, because I don't know where they have to dig down into to go back as far as that is. But there's, I think, not just me and not just members of bodies, people, particularly the things that we have, planning board has, go but way back. I suppose the ZBA is just the same thing. What
Yep.
was it that the ZBA decision was, and what are they allowed to do? You know, that sort of thing. And I want a rich resource like that. In any case, I'm less worried about picking which is the prettier page,
Right.
and more interested in the structure, like I'm talking about.
Right.
So the whole search functionality to find things from further back in a efficient way is like a common complaint I hear a lot. And one of the things that I actually talked to William about last night was that part of the problem that we have today is that we dump documents in there and it's just all searchable and there's no cultivation of that data.
Mhm.
And so he like we talked a little bit. I told him that I recommended to talk with Civic Plus as part of this process, as far as what type of content cultivation they can do or would do, because there's a lot of meta content tags and such you can put on things to make searches more powerful, to
Right.
find things in a certain way that we never have taken advantage of. So I'm interested
Yeah.
in seeing what
If-
he ends up back with from that.
Yeah, if you go look at our document upload, none of them have tags, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the field is there. Nobody puts anything in it. They all name the documents based on their own nomenclature that has no rhyme or reason to it. So some of it is policy driven, right? because it's just been however you want to do it, you do it. And so we've even, there was an email today from William about if you put anything up on the website between now and I think it's August 1st, you're going to have to re-upload that because basically it's a snapshot in time, right? So we've taken a snapshot, we've started our migration. Anything that falls between the migration and the go live has to be re-uploaded. It's not a huge deal. It's not going to be some crazy amount of documents. But he's already created, the tracker, how to name it, and where all of this gets stored. Which, I think in years past might have just been, hey, don't make sure you save all your stuff because you're gonna have to put it up again, right? And so everybody does that in their own way, but we're trying to be a little bit more conscious of this is how you're going to do it. This is how you're going to name your document. This is where your document's going to end up, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's good to hear because the search engines can only do so much, even if you have a wonderful document center like what was being discussed last night. But if your data is not in a certain way, you're really limiting what you can look for. So that sounds good that you guys seem like you're already looking and moving towards that.
Yeah, we'll see how it works out.
Yeah.
But that's all our, that's our plan. So I don't know. I think William has quite a bit of experience website wise. He knows a lot about that area, and he spent a ton of time on other government websites to look at, if Pembroke, if you can go on their website and find everything you want right away, well, then we want ours to look like Pembroke. And then we want to talk to the IT people and say, how come your search engine works better than, or your search bar works better than our search bar? How are you using your tagging abilities and your nomenclature and all the rest of it, to make that work a little bit better. The other thing we're looking at, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I really don't know hardly anything about it. We are looking at an additional service when it comes to accessibility and ADA provisioning. So the website as it sits now that we're going into is leaps and bounds ahead of the website we have currently. There is a newer product out there, however, that does more of that accessibility in an automated way, which is good for the type of general user that we have in town of Grafton and their knowledge and understanding of how to manipulate some of these features. It also gives more control to the user to set their settings to what they personally need to be able to view the website in a way that's let's call it aligned with their personal needs, right? So a person that is dyslexic or a person that is visually impaired or hearing impaired, instead of this one size fits all approach that we say, well, this is more accessible and here's the whole ball of accessibility. You as the user can go and tell it, no, I can see just fine, but I'm hard of hearing. And so then it tailors the experience to that, which is really neat.
Word of caution on that. I just happened to read an article today about these automated accessibility tools that they in some cases make matters worse.
I don't want to hear that, Dave. I want to get an add-on and have it do everything I want it to do.
So approach that with caution.
Okay,
if it works well, it's good.
Yep.
But it's if nothing else, it's probably wise to approach that with your eyes wide open. There's a limit to what the automated tools can do.
Yes.
And probably if we have access to people who have varying accessibility needs, sort of get them all to try this out and see what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, but yeah, these automated tools can be good, but they can also be problematic.
The customizing, I've just been poking around through all the Apple stuff, iOS and Mac lately, and you want to talk about that sort of thing. It is unbelievable
Yeah.
how much they have. Yeah, no, I want someone to be doing tests where on the other end of this. Okay, I saw somewhere somebody said, go to the town website and look at whatever. And you get there and you don't know how to find it. Like maybe the packet for this selectmen's meeting. And that's partly site design, the stuff we were talking about. And it's partly, I guess, search.
Well, and it's
I don't know
also,
when I've been able to search to find something that I wanted.
so I'm pretty successful at it, but I know where it would be. But one of the things that we need with our design, and William and I have been talking about this quite a bit, is, you know, if you're, I don't want to design it for the Bobs and the Daves and the Allens and you know, who
Mhm.
know what they're looking for, right? You understand local government because you are involved in it, right? You know what a select board meeting packet is. I had a conversation with a woman today about wanting to create a bylaw. No idea what town meeting is, no idea, you know, that the select board's in charge of policy, you know, all of that, which is that's okay. That's, I'm not shaming that person. They're trying to better their community, and I fully respect that. But we need to design it with those folks in mind, right? So
Yeah.
that if you know that you need to look at the select board meeting, you should be able to just click on select board and our date, and all of that data is in the same spot. You know,
That's-
not only the link in the agenda, but the packet, all of it in one clickable spot. So that even by accident, you could click on it, open it up, and then go, oh yeah, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. And that's kind of what I meant a little bit earlier, as far as I'm not necessarily interested in being a part of the usability discussions, because I get that there's people who'll probably be better feedback for that than I would be. Like all of that falls under the usability, that you want to make a application usable for a low entry bar. Otherwise, you know, you're missing the point of the application in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
well,
page designer,
on a site that's grown like Topsy for the last, what, 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a couple of go arounds trying to make it sort this out, but it's not even close.
Right.
Yeah, this discussion illustrates a little bit one of my points of view on this, and that is that our website serves a very diverse community of users, from folks like us who, you know, we've been around it long enough. We know it, you know, pretty much we know exactly where to find what we're looking for, to board and committee members in general who can use the website to, you know, facilitate the operation of the board and committee, to members of the public who are just looking for general information on how do I do this, how do I do that, to people who are, you know, interested in how do I do this particular project, what do I have to do to build an addition onto my house,
Mhm.
to
Right.
people who, you know, there, I mean, there's almost no end of different, you know, different perspectives from which people approach the website. And part of our job is to
approach and
do the
methodology.
best that we can to take, you know, to try to take all those different perspectives into account, look at it. And I have been somewhat successful over the years in looking at a particular application or a particular website from the different points of view, but you know, I'm far from being an expert on that. But that's, you know, ultimately that's what you hope to get is a website that is really usable by pretty much anybody who wants to find something out about the town or do something with or for the town. It's a big job.
Speaking of usability, so obviously it's becoming more the norm for people looking to ask questions to now go to a web page rather than just calling the town center. One of the things people often do nowadays is they go onto their phone to look at stuff. And do we know if there's any plans for, is there going to be a mobile version of this site as well? Or
Can't, I can't remember. I believe so. I mean, we definitely talked about the mobile interface. But what that actually looks like, I don't know top of mind.
because I think that's something that's pretty important to keep in mind, that there's a lot more phone usage now to go to look up something. And the current site is literally miserable to do so on a
Yeah,
phone.
the website compared to the previous incarnation of the website, the current website does, and there's a term for it, which I forget off the top of my head, but it does to a degree adapt itself to the device that you're looking at it on. It's better than it used to be. You know, it used to be that from your phone, all you would get is a desktop version of the website.
It's responsive.
It's now a little,
Right.
it's
Yeah,
somewhat
right.
more adaptive than it used to be.
Yeah, well, there's more
So-
than one way of, I did a lot of that with a cable site when I was doing it, trying with tools back then, to try to change the size of the screen and see how it does and all that kind of thing. I certainly hope that the people that were, the product that we're using considers that.
Well, I'm sure. I just don't, I haven't been on the calls with Civic Plus, so
No.
I don't have any concern that that's taken into account. I think you got Bob Carroll has his hand up.
Bob Carroll has his hand up.
Yeah, so all, not to sound like a broken record, but all the stuff that we're talking about, these come back to an approach and methodology, right? Where we gather requirements, right? We have technical requirements, we have usability requirements, we have business requirements, and then we take the requirements through and we fulfill against the requirements, we test against the requirements, and we deliver against the requirements. But it's key, and that's what these guys that do this for a living, they should be able to have all this pretty much for us to like, okay, we want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. Right?
That's
There's
basically
also a
what, yeah,
budget.
that's basically what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the nice thing I've done, this will be my third website redo with Civic Plus over the years. They are very good at what they do and they understand what we do. It generally, in my experience, the shiny bauble that gets delivered at the beginning works fantastic, and then we muck it up over the years.
Yeah.
So it's a little, I think you're 100%, obviously, Bob, you know what you're talking about. I have a fair amount of faith in the folks at Civic Plus. I've had really good experience with them. My bigger concern, quite honestly, is not that, William's not going to figure out how to make select board stuff, more robust or find a way to make this more searchable, but more that, a year from now, with staff turnover or with staff that take shortcuts, how do we keep doing what we set out to do?
Right. And that's where managing those requirements, right?
Yep.
So you have a record of that, and then you can iterate and further deliver. The other point I was going to bring up was, and it kind of makes me nervous, we have all this upload, right? User upload of stuff. So is there any scanning or, validation for like data privacy and PII, and I'm most concerned about like selectmen packages, because I just looked on the site and I see some Corey applications. Now, strictly, that probably don't have any PII, but I don't think I'd want all my personal data up on the website. So how we get those checks and balances, because again, it's probably not malicious or someone doing this deliberately, but we don't want someone uploading in a selectmen's packet or a scan, an image of a check, right, or series of accounts or anything like that. How do we? Does the Civic Plus do? I don't know if I fall into endpoint protection, but validation and data privacy.
It's essentially on us and our internal policy of what's going to get uploaded and what doesn't get uploaded. I think, again, the risk is fairly low because the departments that deal with protected information don't have a lot of overlap onto the website. You know,
So
know,
the
our
access is controlled.
right. So our you know, our meeting packets, interestingly enough, you know, we redacted a whole bunch of stuff that was sent by some kids interacting with their civic government, and we did that on behalf of the school committee.
Right.
In reality, as soon as they push send, it doesn't matter how old they are, it's a public record.
Mhm.
You know, I ran into this. I had a irate customer send me kind of a malicious email and put all their personal information in there, phone number, all kinds of stuff. And then we got a public records request, and I can't legally redact any of that information, which is interesting, right? So it's mostly incumbent on us to ensure that we're not uploading. I mean, I'm pretty sure the site is, you know, if we upload a PDF, it's just taking that PDF and displaying it. They're not, I mean, I'm sure it's going through something to make sure we're not, you know, uploading a virus or doing whatever we're doing. But beyond that, I think that if a staff member wanted to put up some damaging things, they probably could.
There's often, I've seen recently, some pretty spicy emails in the select board
Yeah.
board packet the last
Yeah.
couple of
But
months.
those are public. I find I get frustrated because I know something's coming and I go into the packet and all I get is a draft motion. I don't get the information. On the planning board site, everything is there by project. You can drill down to the information and you can go back whenever you want and see it. Of course, the information is pretty much straightforward. But if we have public comments that something isn't right, we'll have that, I guess, too.
Yeah.
But it really is frustrating. I can't tell for the select board what's coming because the backup information, you know, the context isn't there. And it should be public records.
So I generally can read through the meeting packet and I'll see like all the correspondence and all of the different like.
Yep. That's
so,
generally posted by Friday afternoon.
yeah, so sometimes there's updates as they update the agenda or whatnot with the meeting packet, but I usually can find the meeting packet information.
No, there's a lot of stuff that isn't there. The planning board's website is updated until minutes before the meeting. I mean, she has to send us an email saying, I put something more up there at 5 p.m, so that we know, you know, it used to be Friday was a cutoff and we used to go in and pick up a package, a folder full of stuff to go study. And that was it on Monday night. Now it's, I don't know. We're going to talk about that someday here.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose we're sort of drifting off topic a little. I mean, we could, some of
Yeah.
us at least could go on and on for hours discussing the website and what we might, what we like, what we don't like, but at
Let's
some point,
maybe we could agree to put a pin in it and have William come back and deal
Yeah.
with you people. I mean, have
with
a
you
meeting or
people.
no, I'm kidding. No, it would be, I think it would behoove all of us to have William come back. Like he's been inundated with the process and can probably give you more eloquent answers on things than I can. And you guys can go from there with any feedback that you might have.
yeah, Bob Carroll, your hand is still up on Zoom. Do you? Oh, okay. So yeah, let's at least tentatively plan on dedicating them at least much of our next meeting, the first Wednesday in August, to discussion with William about the status and plans for the website.
Yeah.
It
Evan's gonna
probably
scare
won't be the
William.
only one. I think we
I'm
could
gonna tell
easily,
William nothing.
We could easily spend several sessions on it, I suspect.
You're going to warn William, say, watch out. Like William's going to all of a sudden get sick. Like, oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, can't make it.
No, I like to tell him the wrong information, so when he gets here, he's really blindsided with your questions.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like, they don't have any concern about the interface. They only want to talk about the colors.
There you go.
You know,
Yeah,
Well, probably we could manage that if necessary.
Is the website accessible to colorblind people?
that's right.
That's the
That's
only
actually
question.
that's one of the things.
That's important.
It is. Do you want to move on to the RFP?
Yeah, unless you have anything else under a general status report.
I do not, sir.
We pretty well covered that. So yes, RFP.
All right, so RFP wise, you've all seen the updated draft, I would assume. We had our, obviously our baseline. We didn't reject any of your comments. So anything that you gave us in that document that was born out of your last meeting, the IT support services, IT committee comments, they all make it in here in one form or another. It might not be verbatim language, but it does what we believe it does what you intended to do. In most cases, I did, when I was going back and comparing the two, I mean, I can see where some verbatim language was carried over as well. So the next step for us on this is, we wanted to wait until we could show you what we thought our final product was. And then we'll release it with a, an end date someplace around the middle of August. And go
So
from
this
there.
wasn't released, Evan, yet?
No, we were, the date was the 7th.
Yeah, I
For-
see that in here.
And you guys were supposed to originally meet last week, right, Dave? Am I misremembering? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had decided, the conversation was, let's just wait till after the meeting, because it was, what difference does a day make? And then of course you guys got pushed a week. So it really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't, as far as our needs, doesn't really impact anything in any major way. Just push
sorry,
it.
that was my fault.
There you go.
Well,
So we,
Alan and Bob Carroll both
Yes, I
expressed a preference for meeting this week.
absolutely, yeah, and it really doesn't. Quite honestly, we're doing 2 other RFPs, so it was just as welcome for us to skip a week and issue this one separately.
Yep.
So
Yep. So aside from putting appropriate dates in, as far as you're concerned, Evan, it's subject to any further comments that we as a committee might have. It's ready to go.
yeah, yep, we're ready to pull the trigger on it. So
Yep. So anybody, I read through it. I didn't see nothing leaped out at me as needing further work. Bob Carroll, you have your hand up.
Yes, sir. So the one thing I did compare it to some others that I've responded to in past lives.
okay,
And usually at the end, for, state and federal level contracts, they have, either an addendum or an attachment or some sort of covenant, where they have like the standard provisions, right? The insurance, force majeure, confidentiality, whistleblower, workman's comp,
right.
right? All that boilerplate that goes. Do you do that like afterwards, or?
Yeah, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's the same pretty much for everything. So
I would have thought, yeah, you guys
yeah,
had that.
yeah. I think that when I asked William to share it, he just shared the part that you actually probably have a say in
Yeah.
manipulating, as opposed to the legalese stuff that the lawyer makes us put.
Okay, so you got all that. You're good.
Oh yeah,
Cool.
you got it.
Yep. Okay, that's all I had. I'd rather ask, a dumb question and.
Oh,
have
and
the-
I don't think that's.
I don't think that was dumb. Yeah, I think that was a good question.
My general philosophy is there are no dumb questions. I will occasionally,
Yeah.
I will occasionally make exceptions, but
You know
as
what,
a
Dave?
rule, yeah.
Why don't you come hang out with me for the day, and we'll see if that changes.
So I read through it, and I had I think 3 things that I just wanted to follow up on. I think they're all 3 things that we talked about last month. the first one that we talked about that I didn't really see show up in the RFP is the discussion of you have a lot of you have a lot of statements that this is required, this is required, and this is required for a lot of stuff such as the monitoring, 24/7 monitoring and such. But we discussed last time about the concept of SLAs, that there's not really anything in there like I looked through and I might have missed it, but there's not anything in there regarding what the expected SLA for for the time for restoral or for certain types of events that I could find in there. And so I kind of still feel that that might be something that's probably important to have them provide what their SLAs would be for different categories.
Yeah, I think. I thought that there was some language that we had added around.
I might have missed that in a reread through, but when I looked, I didn't it basically talks about here's what's needed 24/7.
Yes,
And then the timeline for projects being 14 days, but I didn't see anything for restorations.
okay. Okay, let me double check on that. I thought we had some stuff under like server administration and network administration.
It basically says to do this regularly, and
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't have a uptime. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps it could be a little more explicit about that.
The next thing that I wanted to, so it talks a lot about the towards the I was nervous a little bit as far as the that it being the blind bid, because generally blind bid means the highest bidder gets it, but then I read through that it covers the there's a technical requirement in there, and there's some summaries in here as far as the ratings for it. I don't know that necessarily needs to be in the RFP, but we did talk about if there is going to be a spreadsheet type checklist where there's going to be some sort of objective grading that's going to be used for meeting certain requirements, rather than just being subjective. Oh, we like this better.
Right. So if you look at the comparative criteria that's in there, it starts on page 7. That's the Mass General Law way to do it.
Okay, so they basically they keep it pretty vague, so you're up to your own subjective.
Correct. So we then we're going to rate highly advantageous, not advantageous, unacceptable. That is the 30B procurement language that we're required to use to do that. And you'll see it is a little bit subjective, right? So
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Consultant has substantial prior experience in work-related IT. That gives us a little bit of discretion when we're what is substantial, so that we do have a little bit of wiggle room there, rather than being just strictly low bid.
Okay. All right. And that's fine. If that's what we have to do it that way, then that's okay. You're right. It's a little subjective, but
Yep.
And the other thing that I don't remember seeing here, let me just recheck here, was that we talked about the requirements for so there's training mentioned in here. Okay, it does. Sorry, it does have including phishing and scam. Multi-factor authentication. Okay, so I just missed when I reread it through. So okay, so that was my third thing. So yeah, I mean, I think most of it looks pretty good. I think it added a lot more on the side of security that wasn't there before. So I'm pretty happy with the changes.
And I'll bring the SOA question back to William, and see what he has to say about that.
Yeah, it's just for me, in my experience working with vendors, that's a pretty important measure to have, because a lot of times vendors are measured on their performance to the SLA, and so it's a generally an objective way to measure someone if they data driven, if they meet what they're supposed to do or not.
Yeah, Bob Carroll.
Yeah, just real quick. So Evan, what's your plan as far as, you're going to get your responses, you're going to do your scoring, And then are you gonna like pick the, you know, 1, 2, or 3 top and do like a best and final and do some negotiation, because that may be an opportunity to negotiate those SLAs, right? That Alan's,
Yeah, not really.
no,
No, because we're not, so, well, let me back up. I can negotiate some of, let's say vendor A, vendor number one, we really like. And their SOA, is what, I don't know. I don't know enough about what that's called, but let's say it's, we'll have you back up and running in 24 hours. But
right,
we don't want that. We want 12 hours. If we go to them, there's nothing that after we've gone to contract, we can't say, as part of the contract, we want that at 12, not 24. We can negotiate that stuff. You have to be careful that you can't give somebody else the advantage by saying to them, if this was 12, we would pick you, and then they do that. You have to kind of do it on the back end.
yeah, or you know, when you winnow it down to your, 3 finalists or 2 finalists, give them in their best and final, okay, here's what we really need to see, and give them, that's what you would, give them that and say, okay, what's the cost for this? And then have you run off with the 2 last.
Yep. I think this is why a lot of communities go with the folks that are on the bid list. Because they don't have to
Just
deal with
pick
this.
when you're done.
But there are so many more vendors out there that aren't part of that bid list that I think do more niche work for what we're,
Yeah.
and on a like a CMD, I really like CMD because I know all of the people. And it doesn't mean that there's not another CMD out there that I meet and I know those people, but having those relationships helps us a ton, rather than this anonymous amalgamation of people that are on the bid list. When you can, I know and have every single person that works at CMD's cell phone number.
Right.
If we crash, I can remember in Munson, we got hit by lightning, and it was me, Mark Jardim, and the police chief underneath a tower in the pouring rain, moving patch cables and trying to get, running extension cords to get 911 back up. That only happens because I have Mark's cell phone and I can call him and say,
Right.
we're in bad shape. I do value some of that the smaller companies will bring to us, which is why we're doing this and not just going.
Yeah, we just want to make sure
Just
Charlie
go.
keeps driving his Pathfinder and not a Maserati, right?
Oh, absolutely. Trust me, I beat Charlie up just fine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree pretty strongly with your take there. For some things, I am totally okay with going with the lowest bidder for stuff like running new fiber when I need to have fiber run down the street, or if I need to have wiring redone or such. I mean, it's pretty standard, pretty straightforward. But for instance, when I'm looking at MSSPs or such, there's a lot more on the technical side or the availability side that become factors in the decision, that is not just about money, because the amount of money you lose to a vendor that's not responsive during a time of emergency can be greater than the amount of money you save by going with the cheapest approach. And that's kind of what I was kind of commenting on a little bit, as far as that made me a little concerned with the closed bidding. But I feel like it does go into detail. It gives you the room to make sure that there's certain minimum requirements that are needed to be met for that.
Excellent.
Anything else on the RFP? So Evan will get William to finish it up, and we'll shoot it out there, and we'll get about a dozen really excellent responses, and it'll be a hard time choosing the best candidate, right?
Let's hope. Let's
We'll see
hope.
how that works out.
Yeah. All right. Was that it for me, Mr. Chair?
I do believe we've reached just about the end of the meeting. The only agenda item we have left is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump off
As
and go.
drafted.
Have yourself a good rest of what's left of the night, Evan.
Thank you. I appreciate all your hard work, gentlemen. And we'll talk soon.
Evan, I really appreciate the discussion about the website. That's better than all the years.
Okay, well, that's good. Now we'll see what the product winds up like, but
Well,
we'll see how happy we are after that.
I think there's quite a few of us who'd be happy to pitch in and help make it the best we can make it.
All right, I'll talk to William about all of that tomorrow, and let's go from there.
That
Sounds
sounds
good.
good.
Take
All
care.
right, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay, good night, Evan.
Thanks.
And
I would like to make a motion to move that we approve the June 1st, 2022 minutes as written.
Second,
Second.
moved and seconded that the June 1st minutes be approved as drafted. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Bob Carroll,
Aye.
Ellen Baker,
Aye.
Bob Hassinger,
all right,
and Dave Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously.
I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
I don't think we need a second, right?
I think it's,
Yes, you do.
Yes, it
oh, we do?
Second.
And it's not debatable.
moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Carroll,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Baker,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimous, so we are adjourned.